All right, everybody. It's another week of minor league news and brews here. As you can see, anybody that's on the video feed, I got my Bradenton Marauders hat on because, as we all know, it all starts in Bradenton. Today, I'm going to do something I was planning on doing last week. Sorry, guys, didn't get to the episode, but wanted to still follow through with something that I had been thinking about. And I kind of looked at each level of the system from Bradenton to Greensboro to Altoona, the whole way up to Indianapolis. And as we all know, there's prospects that we, may be looking at or maybe thinking about could be having either a breakout, taking a step forward, continuing the success that they were having, bounce back seasons, whatever it may be from prospects. So we have like these lists of players that, we're going to be keeping an eye on and some that may come out and surprise us. We don't, know what players are going to do from year to year. On this show, we've talked about with experts, with writers, with the broadcasters that a lot of these are very, very young guys, so they may come back with an extra 15 to 20 pounds on them, may have an adjusted swing, may have an uptick in velocity, a little bit more power, whatever it may be. So I kind of wanted to just like walk through the systems, starting with Bradenton, and I'm going to go with what people may see as the negative side of things. I thought about like whether this would be like disappointing, discouraging, and I felt like those were like a little bit too harsh for some of these young players, especially since I mean, once again, I don't want to keep bringing it up, but in previous years, these guys could be in Bristol, they could be in short season in West Virginia, or they could be in the FCL because the Pirates used to have two FCL teams. They had the black team and the gold team down in the FCL, and now it's just the FCL Pirates. So it's I know they can move guys in and out of there. From Pirate City, also down from Bradenton, doing rehab assignments there as well. But I mean, previously you had rosters, that would be 28 guys, maybe 30 guys on each team. So you got like 60 guys there. Cut that in half, and you have to find a place for all of these guys. And the FCL has started, so definitely take a keep an eye out for some of the players. Jordani De Los Santos, my favorite prospect in the FCL, Axel Plaz. There's a lot of good people to be watching. As I'm recording here on Thursday, John Drecker from Pirates Prospects announced Michael Kennedy, the left-handed pitcher, former New York Gatorade Player of the Year, is making his professional debut. So keep an eye out for some highlights, for some stats from there. But let's get into, I guess, it would be the downs within the Pirate system. And when I say downs, it doesn't mean that these players can't bounce back. It's more of just I was maybe looking for more or expecting more from some of these players at this point in time during the season. Uh, and the biggest one for me that sticks out in Bradenton is Javier Rivas, 6'6" shortstop from Venezuela. Had a fairly decent FCL last year. OPS sitting around 757. Did have some problems with some strikeouts. Struck out around 40 sometimes, walked only about 10 times. I was looking for him to maybe be a little bit of one of those breakout guys here just because of the skill set, the athleticism. Really, really struggled in Bradenton. I believe within the past few days here was sent back down to the FCL to get some work, batting around 188, OPS sitting at a 477. But the biggest thing for me is that he had 74 strikeouts to 10 base on balls. And that is just not going to cut it. even in low A Bradenton. You can only let that go on for so long. Another guy, I got to see him pitch on the backfields when I was down there for spring training. Alessandro Eckerlani. He's from San Marino. And I believe it was like an island of like something like 3,000 people. I may be off a little bit right there. Had performed fairly well in limited action the FCL last year, 30.1 innings, had a 1.286 whip. Uh, and I was just kind of looking for him to kind of get into Bradenton and continue along with that. Has made 8 starts, and he has been coming on, has been improving. So this may end up turning into an up. I mean, we're only on June 8th here. We're about 2 months into the season. Uh, you got July, you got August, you got September. So, I mean, there is still time for this to turn around, but right now has about a 5.22 ERA, a 1.806 whip. And if you want to go back and listen to one of the previous shows I did, a lot of times here, like with the guys in low A, I'll be talking about OPS for the hitters, their strikeout rates to walks. And then for the pitchers, I focus a lot on, I mean, the ERA might be a little bit, I don't know, a little bit thrown off. Not sure like how they're calling errors down there. Sometimes there's plays that should be errors that aren't called errors. And sometimes, you'll see a guy with a line where he has given up 7 runs and maybe only one of them's earned. So a lot of times it's just looking for, how many guys they're putting on base, the walks and hits per innings pitched. And for Eckerlani, it's not something that, is it's not too great to see for him right now. Moving up to Greensboro, I could change hats for everybody that's on there, but I'm just going to keep this one on because I got my headset on, and I'll end up like fumbling and knocking some stuff over. And it's Po Yu Chen. I saw Po Yu Chen pitch in Bradenton last year. He has a really really good curveball. His velocity, fastball is not gonna tick up there too much. High 80s, low 90s, good control. And that was like his calling card in Bradenton last year. Had a whip about 1.261. Hasn't moved up that much in Greensboro. And I want to get to this. I want to get somebody on here that covers the South Atlantic League just because I've been looking at the dimensions of all the ballparks because we always talk about, the bandbox, First National Bank Field down there in Greensboro, but I've seen some of the dimensions for the parks throughout the South Atlantic League, and I think there might be more than just one bandbox. So for them, I just kind of go to whip 1.338, keeping it like fairly low, but it's not. I was looking for just like a little bit more. The strikeouts really haven't ticked up at all. Before he was a little bit over the level of he had 98.1 innings pitched, 103 strikeouts last year. Now just a little bit below that, 46 uh, and 45 strikeouts. Has given up 7 home runs, but like I said, I don't want to focus on that too much until I talk to somebody. One of the guys I had listed for the top 5 prospects to watch in Greensboro this year was Sammy Ciani, and Sammy Ciani had been in Greensboro last year. Played some summer ball, went over to Australia, the Australian Baseball League, and played over there just to get some more work in. Hit well there. When he came back here, I was looking for a little bit more. OPS is sitting about 746. Strikeouts and walks are getting a little bit closer together. The average of 229 for a guy like that, it's not really. Uh, he does have some power, needs to hit for a little bit more contact. So when I say down on this one, I'm hoping, he is getting a little bit older, 22 years old. I would like to see him maybe be up in Altoona with a guy that for some reason I seem to, put them together a little bit more, and that's Connor Scott. Connor Scott is a year older, so you're kind of expecting for a little bit more from him. Former first round draft pick out of high school. Uh, Altoona, he did spend a decent amount of time, actually the full season in Altoona last year. Hit about 247, had a 697 OPS, and he was playing almost 2 full years below the average age for that level. So I was looking for a little bit more of a bounce back. I mean, defensively, you can go on and follow Altoona on Twitter and look in there, and he has, come up with some clutch hits, has made some really good plays in the outfield. But right now, his OPS is sitting below 600. Uh, Striking out at a pretty good clip. It's one that he, was at last year. He had like about 33 strikeouts, 92 walks. This year it's 8 strikeouts and well, no, it's 8 walks and 30 strikeouts. And I might have had those backwards, but striking out like, over 3 times as many times as he's walking. That's not really going to cut it. So that's a definite disappointment. One of the biggest ones for me, and this is a guy that kind of came out of nowhere to a degree in 2021, was the minor league player of the year, is in Altoona for a second season. I was out there for opening day last season in Altoona. I believe he cranked a home run, him and Leo Pagero, and I was looking for him to continue kind of what he started during the previous season. A lot of that in Greensboro for Matt Frazier, but then did get the bump up to Altoona in 2021. Didn't see too much of a decline, a little bit of decline in the power. Last year, 617 OPS for the season, whole season in Altoona. I it's 681 now, but it's kind of disappointing to see him take such a step back after having such a great season. But it's a guy I'm definitely keeping an eye on. I want to see if he can get back to the form that he had during the previous season. And then going to the pitching side in Altoona, it's two relievers, but it's two relievers who I know in 2022 I wrote about a lot. Undrafted free agent from Hartford, that'd be Nick Domkowski, just really performed well, really well, kind of worked his way through the system. In 2022, started in Bradenton, went to Greensboro, finished the year in Altoona, and was looking for him to continue what he did. Right now, his whip is sitting right below a 1.60. Obviously, not very good. In 25 innings, only has about 18 strikeouts, where last year in 67 innings had about 86 strikeouts. Just a little bit disappointing to see the discouraging, the words that I don't want to use, but those are the only things I can think of to describe this because I was looking for so much more. And then Tyler Samaniego, it was somebody who I did see pitch in a spring training game when I was down in Bradenton, lefty reliever, another guy that kind of like moved his way through the system last season. Uh, was in Greensboro, performed extremely well. Came up to Altoona, struggled a little bit, but still, put up some pretty decent numbers. Had a whip that was near elite, below and around the .800 mark. So that's like an elite arm right there. This year, back in Altoona, thought he could have started in Indianapolis. Saw him, I believe, once Harlan Garcia was injured, was listing him as another left-handed option out of the bullpen. Well, right now he has a 1.425 whip in Altoona, only 20 innings. And like I said, the ERA, and especially for a reliever, 6.10 is what people will look at pretty quickly. Um, that could go up and down, but it will take a little bit longer for that whip to adjust. So hopefully he can get back on track, get going in the right direction. And for Indianapolis and the disappointing, the discouraging area, it's going to be kind of like, I guess, confusing because I'm going to list two names of players that I believe can actually contribute this season, and one of them that can contribute, well beyond this season. And the first one is Andy Rodriguez, and the reason this falls into like more of a disappointing for me is because of the injury to the forearm. Was on Locked On Pirates today with my buddy Ethan Smith. Go back and listen to that, and I talked about how getting out of the rhythm, getting out of the timing, also, having a forearm injury, people will say, well, you can still swing a bat, he can come back in DH. Well, got to get the timing back, got to get the strength back. If you got a sore forearm, try to swing a bat and see how that feels. So for me, that was more along the disappointing side of it. Has picked it up in June. Would like to see that continue, but that's more of why it's along the disappointing end for me. And the other one is Kanan Smith and Jigba making the team, big league club out of spring training, mostly because he's been a guy that has shown patience at the plate, even though he has had a K rate. Somewhere, last year in Indianapolis, around 23.9, but also had a walk rate of around 15.1. So showing a lot of patience at the plate. Obviously did not show up in MLB, had a strikeout rate of around 43, sent back down to Indianapolis, and it really hasn't bounced back. He's got a 31.1% K rate right around there at this point in time, and then a walk rate of just above 10. So that's really not something that's been in his profile before. So I would like to see that even out a little bit more. But to me, that's just kind of disappointing. Maybe not playing a lot up in Pittsburgh, and then getting back into the swing of things. Some of that maybe turning around. I've seen him hit for a little bit more power, so I don't know if he's sacrificing the walks for more power at this point in time. Great athlete, and I could see him definitely contributing and being back up in Pittsburgh at some point in 2023, but I have to see that move around a little bit. A guy that I had towards the end of last year, and I believe middle last year, and he came up shortly after that, Yeri De Los Santos. Then went down to an injury, wasn't performing well, hasn't been performing very well in Indianapolis. Got the quick call up to Pittsburgh because they needed some bullpen help. Didn't have a bad outing there, but in general, it just really has not been good. Um, in in Indianapolis, I mean, I don't even want to really read this. He has a whip that's above 2.500 at this point in time. So I mean, I don't know, the velocity's down. Like to see him, maybe uh, I don't know if you not shut down or whatever, but just needs to build back up, developmental list maybe, just to kind of work on some things. And this other one is disappointing to me because of some of the struggles that the major league team has been having. Uh, you need all the starting pitching you can get, and Carmen Majinski did not pitch poorly. May not have been lights out in Altoona last year. Uh, had a 1.415 whip, a little bit high, but there was a quick decision, and I wouldn't say quick, but like there was a decision to move him to the bullpen. He's got a 1.368 in Indianapolis. Maybe they were thinking, just all arms on deck. It's not saying that he'll be a reliever for forever, but it's a guy that, I would have liked to seen what he could do in Indianapolis as a starter before moving him to the bullpen, and not, having to go the other way around. And now, after being negative for 20 minutes, I'm going to turn around and be very positive here. Uh, the guys, the ups, as maybe some surprises here, maybe some encouraging stuff. It's stuff that some players I was really looking forward to seeing and thought they would perform well, and then other ones that maybe I didn't see coming, didn't have these expectations for, and all the guys that I listed in like the discouraging thing, those are guys that like I had listed as ones that I was looking for some things from this year. So I mean, there's probably other ones that you could think of. So hit me up in the comments, comment on the video, on the audio when it comes out, and we can definitely have a discussion about it. Going back down to Bradenton, and Manuel Torrero has really just been kind of lighting things on fire. In Bradenton, he performed a lot better in the FCL than I remember. I had about an 890 OPS there last season. He is still hovering above the 800 OPS mark. Doesn't have a ton of power. Doesn't strike out a ton. Walks a decent amount. But just an all around really good baseball player. And for the pitching side here, it's actually fairly easy. Thomas Harrington, now up in Greensboro. I first round draft pick last year, competitive round balance. I believe it was pick 36 out of Campbell University, the Fighting Camels. I'm going to get one of them hats one of these days. Just basically blew away the Florida State League. And a lot of people, there's just something I want to touch on. It said, well, maybe you could have been aggressive and put him in Greensboro. But I go back to something that John Baker said during the offseason, where he said, some guys may start a level lower than you think they maybe should or could or would, just because we want to give them, almost that launching pad to get, have experience some success, then move up. And I feel like this might have been the case with Thomas Harrington. The other thing, I just did the top 5 Pirates prospects that came out on Tuesday. I had 2 weeks worth of it there. But for me, it was kind of noticeable when I looked at something, when I was just kind of curious because people are like, maybe he should have been up there. I looked at the splits of his pitching performance versus the younger players in the Florida State League, and then also versus the older players, and it was a fairly significant a decrease, jump on average, on base percentage, and slugging percentage. So go read that article, but it was just something I wanted to keep an eye on. Because as he moves up to Greensboro, there's going to be a lot more older players, players his age, not a lot younger players, but he did struggle against the older players in the Florida State League a little bit. Extremely talented kid, still looking for big things from him. And then also getting Tamar Johnson back in Bradenton has been hitting well as of late. Had the hamstring injury, slow to start, and still extremely, extremely young. I could still see him moving up to Greensboro, before the end of the season, or they may just, each year bump him up a level until it's his time to reach the majors. But that's one good thing there. And then moving up to Greensboro, I mean, everybody above who wasn't on there, I mean, you're all welcome. The Anthony Solometo hype train. I mean, the dude has just been absolutely unreal in Greensboro. Uh, Whip below, 1.2, uh, even when he's giving up contact, a little bit hard sometimes. But I mean, the guy's like, he's like painting down there. It's like the corners, wherever he wants to go. Very good control of the ball. 61 strikeouts through 54.2 innings is what I have right now. Uh, he just looks really, really good. A guy that I'm going to be talking about here once I see him moving up from Altoona to Indianapolis, I see Solometo following him behind and getting that bump up to Altoona. And for a guy that goes to at least, a curve game a month, I'm really looking forward to that. Just finally getting to see him pitch and to move up to the curve. I got to give, a shout out to my boy, Anthony Murphy. If you don't, please go follow Anthony Murphy, follow his YouTube channel, see what he writes on Pirates prospects. He's been on the Sean Sullivan hype train uh, pretty much, I think, since he was drafted, and for good reason. He just has pitched really, really well in Altoona and pitched really, really well in Greensboro last year. So I think it's somebody who just kind of maybe was under the radar a little bit just because of the other, like you got a Jared Jones. Like I said, but prior to that, I mean, you've got Quinn Priester in the system. Mike Burrows, even though he's injured, Luis Ortiz coming from out of nowhere. Just a lot of pitchers like within the system. Kyle Nicholas. So you're not. It's like one of those guys that may show up and it's like, where'd this guy come from? Well, the guys that have been following the system. I mean, they know. They know. Sean Sullivan has just been. It's just a very solid, reliable pitcher in Altoona this year. And then somebody who just jumped into the Baseball America 100. And before I praise him, I do have to say this. If you are going to share who's on the Pirates list from all of these top 100s, whether it be Baseball America, whether it be MLB Pipeline, whoever it may be, Fangraphs, when they update, their systems rankings, whatever it may be, please just share a link to the article because the number of like the amount of time that these people have put into compiling these lists, talking to scouts, researching, watching film, doing whatever. I mean, I think feel like it's doing them a disservice to just, obviously as Pirates fans, that's who you want to see where, your guys are at and where they're listed. And if you want to do that, I mean, that's just fine. But please, like above that, below that, hopefully above that, encourage people to actually open those articles, pay for some of those sites and to actually, give credit where credit's due to all the people, like not just to get clicks for your, Twitter page. Those guys have put in a ton of work. And this guy has put in a ton of work. Jared Jones, still, I mean, he's over 3 years. Every single level he's been at, he's been right around at least 3 years younger to now over 3.5 years younger than the person at their level. The whip has just gone down every year 1.47 in Bradenton, 1.353 in Greensboro, 1.107 in Altoona, and you got to see this kid's pitch. I mean, everybody talked about it before the season, like the fastball and everything. When I was down there and got to see him pitch on the backfields, I mean, the off speed stuff is just wipeout. I mean, so when you pair that, and I know a lot of times what we're talking about here, a lot of people believe he's got a third pitch, but you talk about everybody was like saying he profiled as a reliever. I mean, that will be something that this kid will fight tooth and nail. He was getting fired up, on the mound, on the backfields, ton of passion. Not that, all these guys don't, but I mean, just absolutely ridiculous amount of passion. And then moving up to Indianapolis, encouraging to see. Aaron Shackelford mentioned him on the regular Bucs in the Basement podcast this past Tuesday with Chris. Just because he does play some first base. Carlos Santana's been struggling at first base. Also mentioned, obviously Andy Rodriguez, but has a little bit of power, plays the position very well, can also play second base, can play in the outfield, a lot of versatility, 26 years old, might just want to see what you have with him there, but, very, very encouraging, very, somewhat surprising to see, Aaron Shackelford perform that well. And then I always want to point back to Cal Mitchell. Cal Mitchell, a lot of people, I mean, we got to see him in the majors last year. He's a negative .4 WAR player. Cal Mitchell just turned 24 years old. Like the kid's still only 24 years old. And what he always does after getting off to a slow start is he hits in AAA. Over the past 28 days, he's got his OPS 891, 3 home runs, 2 doubles, uh, walking almost as much as he's striking out. It's definitely he's turning things around there. I know defense has always been the concern for him, but good to see Cal Mitchell turning it around. And because we didn't have last week, we're gonna speed through 6 delicious beers here. A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer. Let's order another pitcher of beer. Last week, since the Pirates were on a West Coast swing, I had originally decided I was going to do Firestone Walker, one of my favorite breweries from California. So I test tasted the Psychedelic Arcade, a 6.3 West Coast Golden Rye IPA coming in at 6.3. I gave that a 400 uh, and that's the weighted. Not weighted, it's a 450, just a great drinking beer. They have the Hopnosis IPA 6.7, American and New Zealand IPA. I gave that a 4.25, dropping that down to a 375. The Union Jack IPA, their West Coast IPA. I thought it should be maybe like a British IPA or something. Coming in at 7%, I gave that a 400, dropping that down to 350. And then the Mind Haze, one of my juicy, hazy, tropical IPAs. Everybody knows I love the hazy IPAs. That one, 6.2%, coming in at a 450, drop that down to a 400. And this one has really no meaning whatsoever. I don't know if everybody can see this here. I saw this and I had to have it because the Founders All Day IPA, let me point over here, is one of just my favorite IPAs of all time. Very easy drinking, comes in at under 5%. That one right for me, that's a 500. Drop that down to a 450. I mean, that's going to be one of my favorite beers of all time. But what they did is they have an all day haze, an all day West Coast, and all day Crimson Sky IPA. All of those coming in at under 5%. I I can't really decide on these ones. So this one, just a blanket 425. Drop that down to 375 for all of these. Go out, pick this up. I've seen this everywhere. I've seen it over at Creekside. The good people over there. I saw it up at JR's in Rochester for anybody that's up there in East Rochester. So you could probably find this one just about anywhere. Founders has been one of my favorites. And before we go, as everybody knows, let's go Indians, let's go Curve, let's go Hoppers, let's go Marauders, and let's go Florida Complex League Pirates.